Hey, what's going on everyone? It's the RC Genius. Today I have got a tuning up video. This video is kind of going to be a how-to video, and also I'm doing this for my brother. This is my brother's Traxxas Slash. It's a two-wheel drive truck, and it's pretty beat up. The body is in really crappy condition. You can see the cracks in it and holes. So there's the body. Battery's still in it. He hasn't even taken the battery out. So I'm going to basically be showing you how to tune this vehicle up in case you have to do it at home. And what I'm doing is, if you see here, if you look here and I press down on the shocks, it doesn't come back up. The truck is really worn out. The shocks don't come back up in the front and the rear. He does need new tires in the back, however, I'm not going to do that today. He does have new tires already. And we're going to clean it up a little bit. We're going to give it some oil and kind of just give it a tune-up. So let's go ahead and let's get started. Okay, so there's a few things that we can do to fix this problem with the shocks. But the first thing I think I'm going to do is I'm going to start by checking to see if they have any more oil in it, because I don't think my brother has ever really taken the shock caps off to see if there's oil in them, and you can see that that's just not right. There's all of this room for it to go up, and it just goes down. And we can also put tighter springs on. That's another option, is putting some tighter springs. But I think we're gonna start by seeing if there's even any oil. I've got some more oil right here. This is some Radiant brand 40 weight shock oil. So I've got plenty of that. And also I've got a few shock spacers if we need to tighten them up a little bit more. Now my brother does like keeping his truck, he likes being able to, when it turns, you know how it leans, the body roll. But the thing is if you have bad shocks, then you really can't do much. So you have to have really good shocks. So I'm going to go ahead and take the cap off. There we go. So the cap's off. I'm going to take the rubber suction piece here off. And it looks like actually there is still oil. Not a lot, however. Looks like there's a bubble actually. I don't know. Is that a bubble? If you look here, you can still see some oil, but there isn't a whole lot. It's kind of weird, but it's not jumping out. Okay, that was, I really hope that the camera just caught that. The oil just splurted out. Alright, we'll top it off a little bit. Put this rubber piece back on, and then we'll put the cap back. Okay, so the cap is back on. Now let's quickly screw this back on and see if that's any tighter. I wouldn't say it's, I would say it's probably not going to be any tighter, because I didn't really put that much oil in it, so there really won't be a difference. But this is something that you have to do sometimes. You just have to check to make sure that there's oil. Give it new oil depending on how dirty it is. Keeping your shocks clean is a very important thing. And over time, depending on how much you drive them and how big you jump them, the springs on your trucks can just wear down, and they'll get really soft, and that's what happened here. So not really any better. So let's go ahead and put a spacer in. So I'm just going to be using one of these large shock spacers. I'm going to put it in on the top right there. And that's a little bit better on this side. Okay, so if this, kind of a little code is if this shock is, if one shock is not, it doesn't need any oil, usually they're all going to be pretty much the same. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add shock spacers on the other 3 shocks. Okay, now right there you can see that's a lot better than what it was. That's a lot better. That's way better. And on the back here, you can see there's already actually some spacers right here. But I'm going to see if I can maybe add one more. Alright, so I just put 2 more here. And again, that's a lot better. So now, the shocks are tuned up now. So I would leave the shocks like that. Now let's take the battery out. Move that off to the side. So that's a lot better, guys. So that's how you do that. Now, next thing for a good tune-up is you want to make sure that all your screws are tight. So kind of just do an overview of the vehicle. Make sure that your shoulder screws and the shocks are tight. Make sure that your steering is tight. All underneath here, make sure there's no screws loose. And kind of just go around the vehicle and check that everything is nice and strong and tight. And just by looking at it right now, it looks like they're pretty good. Doesn't seem like there's any issue with screws coming out. And if you did ever have an issue, you could always put some Loctite on it, or thread locker, whatever screw glue that you use. Now, the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put some oil in the motor. Now, there's 2 things you can do. WD-40 is always recommended, especially by Traxxas. They always say use WD-40 in their motors, and WD-40 works great. Don't get me wrong, WD-40 is a great oil, and I do use it very often. However, when you're driving it on dirt, you do tend to get dirt in the motor because oil is a dirt attractant. So something else you can use that you might have not thought of is you can use gun lube. You can use some of just regular gun lube, because gun lube is dry. Right here it says dry spray lubricant on the top, and then you won't really attract much more dirt, and you can use that. It's really no different. It's still oil, so you can just use some of that. But for today, I am going to just use WD-40 because my brother doesn't usually drive his truck on the track, so the WD-40 works just fine for him. So I'm going to go ahead and just squirt a little bit of WD-40 into his motor. You can never really put too much, but I wouldn't say overdose it, especially with that dirt attractant tip that I gave you. And then also, I would also say to kind of put a little bit in the axles, right where the axle comes to the transmission. So I'm just going to do a little bit on both sides here, and that's good. And if you have a 4-wheel drive, do it in the front. So there's that. And then, of course, if your vehicle's waterproof, I would always recommend to spray it down with a hose and make sure that it's nice and clean. And I always keep my vehicles very clean. I'm not going to go ahead and clean this one right now just because he's probably going to use it possibly today, and there's really no sense in having to clean it right now. But that's that. So just take a hose or power washer or whatever, really, and just spray. And if you're sure that your receiver's box is sealed up, you can go ahead and spray over that, but I wouldn't get too much water around the antenna and all that stuff. So yeah, so that's it. Kind of a simple tune-up. Tightened up the shocks, sprayed a little oil on it, and made sure screws were tight, which everything still looks pretty good here. So yeah, so that's going to be it. So thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Also, if you haven't already, hit that little bell icon next to my subscribe button so that way you're notified every time that I upload a video. And I'll see you in the next video on the RC Genius.